When my father passed away, I thought I was ready for anything, grief, memories, even the loneliness. But nothing could have prepared me for the will. My sister, Claire, got everything. The mansion, the company, the money. And me? Just his old rusted pickup truck sitting in the corner of the garage, like a cruel joke written in metal and dust. I almost laughed through the tears. Maybe it was his final punishment for being the daughter who never fit his mold. But when I started the engine, something strange happened. The GPS lit up with one saved destination, repeated every week for years. Same coordinates, same time. Curiosity turned into dread. My father was many things, but never careless. So I followed the trail he left behind, deep into the mountains. And what I found there didn't just break my heart, it made my blood run cold. I'm Emily Carter, 29 years old, a registered nurse who's spent most of her adult life patching up other people's pain while quietly bleeding inside her own. When the lawyer called us to his office, I didn't expect much. My father, Richard Carter, had never been a man of warmth or sentiment. He built an empire from concrete and diesel, not compassion. But somewhere deep down, I still hoped that maybe, just once, he'd see me as more than the daughter who disappointed him. The air inside the office was cold, tinted with the smell of leather and old paper. My mother sat beside me, her fingers trembling as she clasped a handkerchief. My sister, Claire, looked flawless as ever, hair perfectly styled, expression unreadable. The lawyer cleared his throat. By order of the late Mr. Richard Carter, he began reading. Every word felt like a countdown. To my elder daughter, Claire Carter, I leave all business holdings, properties, and personal accounts. Claire leaned back in her chair, lips curving into that small, victorious smile I knew too well. And to my younger daughter, Emily Carter, the lawyer hesitated, scanning the page as if wishing the words away. My personal vehicle, a 1994 Ford pickup truck. Silence. The kind that cuts. I heard my own heartbeat louder than anything else in that room. Mom flinched, but said nothing. Claire turned to me with that sweet venom in her voice. Guess Dad knew where the real brains went, she said softly. I stared straight ahead, biting my tongue so hard it tasted like metal. When it ended, people began standing, shaking hands, offering condolences as if my humiliation were just part of the service. I walked out without saying a word. The afternoon sun burned too bright as I stepped into the parking lot. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger, someone smaller, quieter, invisible. That night, I drove to the house one last time. The mansion lights were on, laughter echoing faintly from inside. Claire was already celebrating. I went straight to the garage. The truck sat there, covered in a thin film of dust and oil, the smell of metal and age filling my lungs. Its blue paint had dulled to gray, the leather seats cracked and weary. Still, when I touched the steering wheel, something stirred an odd mix of anger and nostalgia. My father had taught me to drive in this truck, his hand on the wheel, his voice sharp but patient. Control the road, Emily. Never let it control you. Now, the same hands that once guided mine had chosen to leave me nothing but this relic. I turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Dust swirled through the garage, and for the briefest moment, it felt like he was still there watching. Then the GPS screen blinked on, and everything began to change. The glow from the old GPS flickered across the dashboard, faint and blue against the cracked leather. I didn't even know these models could still hold data. But there it was, one saved destination, burned into the memory of the machine. Dear Haven, last route completed, 47 times. I frowned. Deer Haven? I'd never heard of it. I pressed the screen again. The map zoomed out, showing a snaking road leading deep into the mountains northwest of Denver. The trip log said he went there every Friday. Same hour, same route, for years. A chill ran through me. My father wasn't the kind of man who took mystery drives. Every move he made had a purpose, a pattern. I leaned back in the driver's seat, staring at the screen. It was absurd, this truck, this route, this secret. Yet something in me refused to let it go. Maybe it was anger. Maybe curiosity. Maybe I just wanted to find one reason he'd thought I was worth remembering at all. I rummaged through the glove box, looking for a clue, old receipts, inspection papers, his usual neat handwriting. Nothing. Then, tucked behind a manual, I found a folded piece of paper. It was a map, hand-drawn in pencil, edges worn, the lines fading. A single X marked a location in the mountains, almost exactly where the GPS coordinates ended. I felt my pulse quicken. When I stepped out of the truck, cold air hit me like a warning. The night was still, too still, as if holding its breath. Inside the house, Mom sat by the kitchen table, staring blankly at her tea. She looked smaller than I remembered. "You were quiet at the lawyer's office," she murmured. "Are you okay?" I hesitated, then forced a smile. "I'm fine, Mom. Just tired." She nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Before going to bed, I glanced at the framed photo of us on the hallway wall, Dad in his usual suit, arm around Claire, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder like an afterthought. I whispered, "Why, Dad?" But the silence offered no answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake replaying the image of that map, that single X calling to me. At 2 a.m., I sat up, grabbed my phone, and typed the coordinates into Google Maps. Deer Haven. Population. 0. A forgotten trail closed after a landslide years ago. So, why did he keep going there? I picked up my phone again and called Claire. She answered on the second ring, her tone sharp. "Emily, it's the middle of the night. What do you want? Do you know anything about Deer Haven?" A pause. A long one. Then, "No? Why?" "Dad's truck. It keeps showing that route. Same coordinates every week." Her voice hardened. "Emily, let it go. Seriously. Dad had his reasons." "What reasons?" "Ones that don't concern you." She hung up. I stared at my phone, heart pounding. She was lying. I could hear it. And at that moment, I knew I wasn't going to let this go. Whatever my father had hidden in those mountains, I was going to find it. The next morning, the sky hung low and gray, the kind that presses on your shoulders like a weight. I barely slept, but I didn't care. I packed a thermos of coffee, a flashlight, gloves, and the old map I'd found. Then I grabbed the truck keys. Mom was still asleep when I left. For a moment, I hesitated at her door. She didn't need another heartbreak. But if my father had secrets, she deserved the truth even if it burned us both. The highway out of Denver stretched long and quiet. Mountains loomed in the distance, capped with snow like ghosts of another world. The truck rattled over potholes, the engine humming low, stubborn but alive, just like the man who once drove it. The GPS guided me with that soft, mechanical voice. "Continue for 27 miles. Each turn tightened something in my chest. This wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was compulsion. Halfway up the mountain road, fog rolled in, swallowing the trees in white. The air grew colder, thinner. I tightened my grip on the wheel. My phone lost signal. I should have turned back, any rational person would have. But something about this felt personal. 2 hours later, the GPS beeped. Destination reached. I slowed to a stop on a narrow dirt path barely wide enough for the truck. Pines surrounded me like sentinels, their branches heavy with dew. The silence was suffocating. No birds, no wind, just the slow drip of melting snow. I stepped out, boots sinking into the damp earth. The air smelled of pine and rust. Somewhere far off, I heard a creek murmuring beneath the fog. Then I saw it, the faint outline of a trail disappearing into the forest. And at its edge, almost hidden by overgrown vines, stood a wooden post with faded lettering. "Deer Haven, private access." A shiver crawled down my spine. I grabbed my flashlight, locked the truck, and started walking. The trail wound deeper through the woods, my breath forming white clouds in the air. Every branch that cracked made me flinch. After 20 minutes, I saw something through the trees, a glint of metal. I pushed through the undergrowth until the shape came into view. A cabin. Small, weathered, but intact. Smoke curled lazily from its chimney. Someone had been here recently. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I approached slowly, the crunch of leaves too loud in the quiet. The windows were covered with curtains, no light inside except the faint orange flicker of fire. "Hello?" I called softly. No answer. I stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked beneath my weight. There were footprints in the dust, large, fresh. My father's? I reached for the doorknob. Locked. Circling the cabin, I found a shed attached to the back, the door half open, hinges rusted. Inside were tools, gas cans, and something else, a padlock trapdoor set into the floor. My pulse quickened. Whatever was hidden here wasn't meant to be found. And yet, I knelt down, brushing dirt from the cold metal. The padlock was old but recently used. Someone had been coming back. Someone who didn't want this secret to ever see daylight. I stared at the trapdoor, the padlock gleaming faintly under my flashlight. The shed smelled of gasoline, rust, and something sour like old blood soaked into wood. My throat tightened. Every rational thought told me to leave, drive home, forget this place ever existed. But my father had driven here 47 times. There had to be a reason. I found a rusted crowbar leaning in the corner, probably left behind decades ago. My hands shook as I wedged it beneath the lock and pried. Metal groaned. Then, with a sharp crack, the lock snapped. A deep exhale escaped my lips, half relief, half regret. I pulled open the door. Cold air rushed out, sharp and metallic, brushing against my face like a warning. The flashlight beam cut into the darkness below. Wooden steps led down into what looked like a basement, but the walls were lined with steel, not wood. I descended slowly, my boots echoing. The light flickered across the room, a generator in one corner, a small desk covered in papers, shelves of canned food. But what caught my attention wasn't any of that. At the far wall was another door, heavy, bolted shut, a steel door with a keypad beside it. A keypad. Out here, in the middle of nowhere. I wiped dust from the screen. It was powered, faintly glowing green. 4 digits. I hesitated, thinking of any number that could mean something. Then, out of pure instinct, I tried my birthday. 0729. Beep! The lock clicked. My breath caught. The door creaked open slowly, the hinges moaning like something waking from a long sleep. Inside, the air turned colder, thick with antiseptic and decay. The flashlight trembled in my hand as I stepped inside. The room was small, windowless, lined with metal cabinets, and in the middle stood a hospital bed. Straps hung from the sides. The mattress was stained dark brown old blood, dried long ago. Beside it, a tray of surgical instruments, scalpels, syringes, tubes, all coated with a film of dust. My knees felt weak. I reached for the nearest cabinet, forcing it open. Inside, files. Folders labeled Carter Medical Research, Confidential. My father's handwriting was everywhere. I flipped one open. There were charts, vitals, and photos of a woman. Pale, weak, strapped to that same bed. Scrawled in pen beneath her picture were the words, "Subject to stable. Responds to treatment. Continue testing weekly." My stomach turned. My father wasn't a doctor, he was a businessman. What treatment was he running out here? I turned another page, a medical report, half-burned, signed by him. Trial C, pending evaluation. That was when I noticed something else, a small silver locket sitting on the nightstand. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was tarnished, but when I opened it, a tiny photograph stared back, my mother holding a baby. But the baby wasn't me. My heart stopped. I staggered backward, the flashlight wobbling, the beam slicing across the room. That's when I heard it, faint, but unmistakable, the sound of tires crunching over gravel outside. Someone else was here. The sound of tires on gravel sent a bolt of panic through me. I froze, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. The beam trembled against the wall as dust drifted through the stale air. No one should have been able to find this place. Unless they already knew. I turned off the light, plunging the basement into darkness, and pressed myself against the cold wall. Footsteps echoed above. Slow, heavy, confident. Then a familiar sound, the creak of the cabin door. "I told you to stay out of this." That voice, low, sharp, almost trembling with restrained fury, belonged to Claire. My stomach dropped. I stayed silent, barely daring to breathe as her footsteps crossed the floorboards overhead. She was talking to herself, or maybe to him, in memory. "You couldn't just leave things alone, could you, Dad? You always had to hide everything." The steps moved toward the shed. The door above me opened. I ducked behind the steel bed, heartbeat pounding in my ears. The wooden steps creaked. Then I saw her silhouetted by the faint light from the open door, hair tied back, jacket zipped tight. In her hand, she held a gun. "Emily," she said softly, her voice echoing down the stairwell. "If you're down there, you'd better come out. Now." I stayed silent. "Don't make me do this." Her tone cracked slightly, but her hand didn't. I could smell her perfume now, expensive, familiar, the same one she'd worn the day of the will reading. That memory twisted my gut. I stepped out slowly, raising my hands. "Claire, what are you doing here?" Her expression didn't change. "Cleaning up Dad's mess." Again. "What mess?" I demanded. "You knew about this, didn't you?" She sighed, lowering the gun just a fraction. "You wouldn't understand. He was trying to fix something that shouldn't have broken." "What are you talking about?" Claire's eyes glistened, anger, grief, and something close to fear. "The woman in those files? She wasn't some stranger, Emily. She was Mom's twin sister." The words hit me like a slap. "What?" "Dad tried to save her after she got sick. Experimental treatments. Illegal. He said he could bring her back." Her voice dropped. "When it failed, he buried it all here. The lab, the body, everything. And I helped him." I took a shaky step closer. "You helped him?" "He said it was for family," she said, her lips trembling. "For blood. But when he realized what he'd done, he couldn't live with it. That's why he left the truck to you." "Why me?" I whispered. "Because he knew I'd keep the secret," she said bitterly. "And you wouldn't." The gun lifted again, her finger tightening around the trigger. "Claire, please," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "He was wrong. We can tell the truth. We can end this." She shook her head. "No, Emily. Some things can't be fixed. Some things are better left buried." Behind her, the faint orange glow of the fire crackled in the cabin above she'd left the stove on. "Claire! The fire! Stay back!" Her voice broke into a scream. She backed toward the stairs, gun shaking, tears running down her cheeks. I reached out. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," she cried. "I'm the only one left who understands him." Then she pulled the trigger. The sound exploded through the basement. The bullet hit the wall inches from my head, showering dust and sparks. And before either of us could react, the fire from above roared, devouring the floorboards. Flames licked down through the cracks, and smoke flooded the room. We both froze, realizing too late what was happening. The past, everything our father had built, everything he'd hidden, was burning its way toward us. Flames tore through the ceiling like a living thing, bright tongues licking the wood and dripping molten ash into the basement. Smoke rolled down the stairwell in thick, choking waves. Claire screamed, stumbling backward as part of the upper floor collapsed, scattering sparks across the metal walls. "You set it off!" she shouted, coughing. "You did this!" "No!" I yelled back, voice raw. "Claire, we have to get out!" I lunged toward her, but the gun still trembled in her grip. "Don't touch me," she gasped. "You always ruin everything." The heat hit like a wall. The metal door behind me glowed orange, the air turning too thin to breathe. I coughed hard, eyes watering, lungs burning. "Claire, listen to me," I shouted over the roar. "Dad's gone. Whatever he was hiding, it's over. Please, we can walk away from this." She hesitated, eyes darting between me and the stairwell. A ceiling beam groaned above us, splitting with a sound like thunder. "He wanted to save her, Emily." Claire's voice broke into a sob. "He wanted to fix what happened to Aunt Rose. He said if I helped him, he'd forgive me." "Forgive you for what?" She shook her head violently. "For being the one who gave her the wrong dosage. It was my fault she died." The confession hit harder than the heat. I took a step closer. "Claire, that wasn't your fault. You were 17. You didn't know." "He knew," she whispered, tears streaking through soot. "That's why he started the experiments. To bring her back, to make me atone." She looked up at me, gun lowering, face collapsing in grief. "And now you'll ruin it all." Suddenly, the ceiling beam above her cracked again. "Claire!" I screamed. It crashed down, not fully, but enough to send her sprawling. The gun skittered across the concrete, I rushed forward, grabbing her arm. The smoke was unbearable now, thick, black, full of sparks. "Come on," I shouted. "We have to go." She struggled weakly. "Leave me," she coughed. "You always get to live, Emily. Always." "Stop saying that," I cried, dragging her toward the stairs. "You're not dying here." She looked up at me, eyes glassy, face illuminated by the flickering firelight. Maybe I should. Maybe that's what he wanted. No. What he wanted died the moment he started lying to us. I tried to pull her up the steps, but the structure groaned. The staircase shuddered, half burned away. The beam above the steel bed collapsed, sending up a storm of embers. The fire was eating the oxygen now. Each breath burned my throat raw. I grabbed Claire's shoulders. "Please. I can't lose you too." For the briefest second, her expression softened, something fragile breaking through the madness. Then, behind us, a tank of gas in the corner hissed. The explosion was deafening. The shockwave threw me backward, slamming me against the wall. My ears rang, the world spinning in smoke and flame. Through the haze, I saw Claire lying near the steps, motionless. "Claire?" I coughed, crawling toward her, lungs screaming for air. But the fire had cut off the way out, a wall of flame roaring between us. I reached as far as I could, fingertips brushing hers for a second, before the heat forced me back. "I'm sorry," I screamed. "I'm so sorry." She didn't move. The last thing I saw before stumbling toward the outer hatch was her face calm, almost peaceful, as if she'd finally stopped fighting ghosts neither of us could save. I kicked open the trapdoor, bursting into the night as the cabin above erupted in a plume of fire and smoke. The cold mountain air hit me like ice. I collapsed beside the truck, gasping, coughing, shaking uncontrollably. Behind me, the cabin burned brighter than the stars, and somewhere deep inside that inferno lay every secret our father ever tried to bury, and the sister I could no longer save. The fire department arrived 40 minutes later, sirens echoing through the valley, lights flashing across the misty pines. I sat on the gravel, wrapped in a blanket I barely felt, staring at the burning cabin as firefighters rushed past. Their voices blurred into static. "Structure's unstable. Watch the back wall. Anyone still inside?" And all I could do was shake my head. "My sister," I croaked. She was still down there. An officer knelt beside me, eyes grim beneath his helmet. "We'll do everything we can, ma'am. But it's not safe to go back in." I nodded numbly, clutching the blanket tighter. The night air bit at my skin, but nothing felt real. The mountain that had once looked peaceful now towered like a monument to everything I'd lost. My father's sins, Claire's guilt, my own helplessness. Hours passed before the fire died down enough for them to enter. When the chief returned, his face told me everything before his words did. "We found remains," he said quietly. "But it's impossible to confirm identities until the lab tests come back. I'm sorry." I didn't cry. There were no tears left. Just an empty ache, hollow and endless. By dawn, the site was sealed off with yellow tape. Police cars lined the narrow road, reporters already gathering at the trailhead, shouting questions I couldn't answer. "Miss Carter, is it true your father was involved in illegal medical experiments? Was your sister a suspect? Do you believe this was an accident?" I said nothing, just stared at the smoke curling into the pale morning sky. 2 detectives questioned me for hours at the Ridgefield precinct. I told them everything: the will, the GPS, the files, the lab. My voice cracked when I described Claire. They exchanged glances, writing notes. "You're saying your father and sister conducted medical experiments without a license?" "Yes." "Do you have proof?" "Not anymore." I gestured toward the window, where the black plume still smudged the horizon. "It's all gone." When they finally released me, I drove home in silence. The truck's engine hummed softly, like an echo of him, of all his secrets following me. Mom was waiting at the door when I arrived. Her eyes widened when she saw the soot, the cuts on my hands. "Emily, what happened?" I broke, then really broke. The words spilled out like floodwater, ugly and unstoppable. I told her everything. The basement, the experiments, the fire, Claire. When I finished, Mom sank into a chair, pale as the moon. She pressed a hand to her mouth. He promised me it was over," she whispered. He said he stopped after your aunt died. He didn't stop, I said softly. He just hit it. She looked up at me, eyes red and glistening. And Claire? I swallowed hard. She didn't make it. Her sob filled the room, small, broken, the sound of something finally giving way. I knelt beside her, wrapping my arms around her shoulders. For the first time in years, we clung to each other, no lies, no pride, just two survivors holding the pieces of what remained. That night, I stood outside, watching the horizon fade into darkness. The stars were faint behind the drifting smoke. I could still smell the fire on my clothes, feel the heat on my skin. I whispered into the cold air. It's over, Dad. Whatever you tried to fix, whatever you destroyed, it's over. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew the truth. Some fires don't die when the flames go out. They live in your blood. And mine would never burn clean again. 6 months passed before I could drive back up the mountain. By then, winter had melted into spring, and the road to Deerhaven was open again. The air smelled of wet soil and pine sap. Birds sang where the sirens once screamed, but the cabin was gone. All that remained was a blackened patch of earth, a twisted heap of metal, and a single concrete foundation scarred by smoke. I parked the old truck a few yards away. It was still the same vehicle my father had left me, battered, loyal, and heavy with ghosts. When I turned off the ignition, the GPS screen flickered to life for just a second, as if waking from sleep. The last route glowed faintly on the screen. Deerhaven. I pressed delete. For the first time, it stayed blank. The wind whispered through the burned trees as I walked across the clearing. Every step crunched on broken glass and ash. Somewhere beneath this ground were the secrets that had destroyed my family, my father's obsession, Claire's guilt, my mother's heartbreak. I knelt, pressing my hand to the cold soil. I forgive you, I whispered to him, to her, to myself. The words trembled but didn't break. When I got back to Denver, Mom had started tending a small garden behind our rented house. She moved slower these days, but there was a peace in her face I hadn't seen in years. Sometimes, when I helped her plant new flowers, she'd glance at me and smile sadly. You look more like your father every day, she'd say, and for the first time, it didn't hurt. I found work at a community health center, nothing fancy, just a small clinic where I could use my hands for something good again. I treated people who reminded me of us, the broken, the tired, the ones carrying invisible wounds. In their faces, I saw a reflection of what my family could have been if love had been louder than pride. Every night after work, I drove the old truck through the back roads outside the city. The hum of the engine was steady, now comforting. Once, I would have traded it for anything else my father owned. Now, it felt like the only honest thing he'd ever left me. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, I pulled over and sat on the hood, watching the horizon fade into amber and violet. The air was cool, the kind that carries both promise and memory. I took out the silver locket I'd rescued from the basement, the one with the picture of my mother and the baby that wasn't me. The metal had darkened, the hinge nearly rusted shut, but I still wore it. Not because of what it meant then, but because of what it means now, a reminder that bloodlines can twist, secrets can burn, but choice is what defines us. I whispered into the evening wind, "You lost your way, Dad." But I won't. The truck door creaked when I climbed back in. The engine sputtered, then caught, its low growl echoing across the valley. As I drove down the empty road, the headlights carved 2 thin lines of light through the darkness, a path forward. Some people inherit money, others inherit guilt. Me? I inherited a truck filled with ghosts, and the truth that nearly consumed us all. But the thing about the past is this: it can't chase you forever. Eventually, the road turns, and the fire fades behind you. That night, as Denver's city lights appeared in the distance, I felt something I hadn't felt since the reading of the will. Not anger, not fear, but calm. Real, quiet, calm. I reached across the seat and placed a hand on the cracked leather steering wheel, whispering softly, "It's just you and me now, old friend." The truck rumbled, steady and strong, carrying me home. And for the first time since my father's death, I realized maybe the inheritance he meant to leave me wasn't money or property, or legacy. Maybe it was this road itself, the courage to follow it, wherever it leads.